the Golden Temple, a symbol of peace, harmony, and spirituality for millions of Sikhs around the world. But in the 1980s, it became a battleground for a violent conflict between the Indian government and a separatist movement called the Khalistanis, who wanted to create an independent Sikh state. In June 1984, the Indian Army launched Operation Blue Star, a controversial and bloody assault on the Golden Temple to flush out the militants holed up inside. The operation resulted in hundreds of casualties, including civilian soldiers and the death of Bhindranwale. It also sparked a wave of outrage and resentment among the Sikh community, who felt their holiest site had been desecrated and violated by the state. 4 months later, in October 1984, Prime Minister Indira Gandhi, who had ordered Operation Blue Star, was assassinated by her own Sikh bodyguards in an act of revenge. Her death triggered a horrific pogrom against the Sikhs, especially in the capital city of Delhi, where thousands of innocent men, women, and children were massacred by angry mobs with little or no intervention from the police or the government. The assassination and the riots further radicalized the Sikh separatist movement, and Punjab plunged into a decade of turmoil and terror. Various Khalistani factions emerged, each claiming to be the true representative of the Sikh cause, and engaged in a ruthless campaign of violence and intimidation against the Indian security forces, the moderate Sikhs, and the Hindu population. They also sought refuge and support from Pakistan, India's arch-rival and neighbor, who saw an opportunity to destabilize and weaken India by fomenting trouble in Punjab. The Indian government responded with a massive crackdown on the militants, deploying thousands of troops, paramilitary forces, and police personnel in Punjab. The Punjab police, under the leadership of KPS Gill, a Sikh officer who was known for his iron-fisted and ruthless methods, became the main instrument of the state's counter-insurgency strategy. Gill and his men were accused of committing grave human rights violations, such as summary executions, torture, and enforced disappearances, in their quest to eliminate the militants and restore law and order in Punjab. In the midst of this chaos and bloodshed, the Golden Temple remained a flashpoint and a stronghold for the militants, who had managed to reoccupy the shrine after Operation Blue Star and used it as a base to launch attacks and store weapons and explosives. The Indian government decided to launch 2 more operations, codenamed Operation Black Thunder 1 and 2, in 1986 and 1988, respectively, to clear the temple complex of the militants once and for all. This time, the operations were carried out by the National Security Guards, or NSG, a special forces unit that was created after Operation Blue Star, to deal with high-risk situations such as terrorism and hostage rescue. The NSG, also known as the Black Cats, were trained and equipped to conduct surgical and precise operations with minimal collateral damage and casualties. Operation Black Thunder First, which took place in April 1986, lasted for 8 hours and resulted in the capture of 200 militants with 1 death and 2 injuries. Operation Black Thunder 2, which took place in May 1988, lasted for 10 days and resulted in the surrender of 146 militants with no casualties. The NSG commandos, who entered the temple barefooted and with their heads covered to respect the sanctity of the shrine, used snipers, helicopters, and tear gas to neutralize the militants, who were armed with assault rifles, rocket launchers, and grenades. The operations also exposed the huge cache of arms and ammunition that the militants had stored inside the temple, which included AK-47s, Uzis, Sten guns, carbines, pistols, revolvers, hand grenades, rocket-propelled grenades, detonators, and explosives. Unlike Operation Blue Star, which was shrouded in secrecy and censorship, Operation Black Thunder 1 and 2 were conducted with full transparency and media coverage. The NSG commandos allowed the journalists and the public to enter the temple and witness the operations and their outcome. The operations were widely hailed as a success and a turning point in the fight against militancy in Punjab. They also received a mixed response from the Sikh community and the political parties, some of whom praised the NSG for their professionalism and restraint, and others who criticized the government for violating the sanctity of the temple again. Operation Black Thunder 1 and 2 were not the end of the Khalistani movement, but they were certainly a major blow to its morale and strength. The militants, who had lost their most symbolic and strategic bastion, were gradually isolated and eliminated by the security forces, who continued their relentless operations in Punjab. The civil society, especially the human rights activists, the journalists and the lawyers, also played a crucial role in exposing and challenging the excesses and atrocities committed by both the state and the militants, and demanding justice and accountability for the victims. The moderate Sikhs, who had been sidelined and silenced by the extremists, also regained their voice and influence and participated in the democratic process by forming political parties, contesting elections, and forming governments. By the early 1990s, Punjab had largely overcome the dark and turbulent phase of its history and embarked on a path of peace, development, and reconciliation. Today, the Golden Temple stands as a testimony to the resilience and the spirit of the Sikhs, who have endured and overcome many hardships and challenges in their history. It also stands as a reminder of the lessons and the legacy of Operation Black Thunder, a daring and decisive operation that changed the course of Punjab's destiny and restored the glory and the sanctity of the Golden Temple.